In order to answer these questions, we need to first take a moment and talk about what dominance really is. And that's actually not very easy. The scientific community has multiple definitions and can't really agree to exactly what they want it to mean. In fact, there's even a research article that actually explores the multiple definitions of dominance in science and whether using the term is useful at all. And this lack of a unified consensus of what dominance actually is part of why it's become very confusing in a lot of ways around dog training. The original definition of dominance, as seen in science, was coined in the 1920s, and it is extremely long and specific. But over time, new definitions have sprung up, and a lot of them actually get a little bit more vague than the initial definition. One that most of us are probably familiar with is the concept of a continual, consistent relationship between individuals, meaning that one individual is constantly dominant over another, and that is always the same. The dominant one always wins, the subordinate one always loses. When I'm talking about dominance, I am using the definition that's used in ethology. And that explains dominance as an individual's preferential access to resources over another. And this definition allows for a lot more nuance and flexibility with how it's used. And that actually makes this definition really useful, especially in dogs, because what we see in dogs is an ever-shifting relationship with other individuals. If dominance is defined by preferential access to resources, and one dog specifically likes a certain bed, and the other dog in the house will always allow them to have the bed and move away, then that dog is technically dominant in that situation. But the dog who moved away from the bed, if they particularly like a spot on the couch and the other dog defers and lets them go to that spot on the couch, then that dog is dominant in that situation. So it's really a very fluid and ever-changing relationship between individuals. But to answer your question about what does dominance look like in dogs, well, I kind of just answered it with this scenario about the bed. Because dominance is actually a relationship. It's not a behavior. Now, we could potentially describe observable behaviors that we could put in a classification of dominant, but it would likely be a surprisingly short list. Alpha theory was actually so pervasive in dog culture that we have a really terrible understanding in general as a society of what dominance is. And because that theory was based on pretty much everything the dog did was an attempt at dominance, we have a tendency to think of a lot of their behaviors as dominance, when it's actually very rare that you see any kind of dominance displays from most dogs. And to answer your question as to when would I ever use dominance, I wouldn't. Because dominance isn't training. It's not a methodology.